Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Tracy Davis and Dr. Seema Desai. Thanks for joining us today, Tracy and Seema.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, Kim, this is really fun. Thank you. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. And so I usually start by saying how we met, and for all of us, that would be LinkedIn.
Yes.
And once I connected the two of you, we discovered that you're both IPEC grad. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. So I don't know what the acronym, I mean, I know it's the coaching certification, but I don't know what the acronym stands for.
Yeah, IPEC stands for Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching.
Oh,
It's easier to just call it IPEC, I think.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's great. I'm happy to know what it stands for. And I'll have each of you introduce yourselves in a moment. And today we'll be talking about selected topics from Tracy's weekly newsletters, which are truly fantastic. And Seema has a podcast called Happy and Human, which is, of course, awesome. And during our conversation back in January, Seema shared with me that yoga saved her life, and that really stuck with me. So as we get started, I'll ask you each what you'd most like our audience to know about you. So Seema, why don't you go first?
Well, okay. Thank you so much. I honestly think that for me, I spent a lot of my life trying to figure out what boxes I needed to check off in order to quote unquote be successful. And then that success would mean that I would be happy as a result. And I found myself in a very dark and cold and lonely place when my son was about 5 months old, and I was really struggling because I had it all. I'd become a doctor, I married a doctor, and he saves babies for a living. It's so noble. And we were happy, and we had this child, and there was a lot of other stuff going on at the time, but we were in a new city. I live in Austin. We had just moved to Austin. We didn't really know anybody. And our parents are supportive, but don't physically live close to us, or they didn't at the time. And so that was really hard. And I think as overachievers, we tend to tell ourselves that we should figure it out. We need to muscle up, buttercup. And it took a lot of courage for me to advocate for myself when I was feeling like something was seriously wrong. I wanted to not be here anymore, to be quite frank. And when I finally figured out that I wanted to advocate for myself, I wasn't just tired. I wasn't just lonely. That was kind of the beginning of it all. And so I'm so grateful to my son, because if it weren't for my experience with him, I wouldn't have found all this wonderful stuff that's happened since. So I found yoga. Kim, to your point, I found yoga at first as a way to cope, and it became a passion. And now it's really become a part of who I am, and how I do things, not only just the physical poses, but there's a lot of mental, spiritual stuff in the background that's also required to really be yogic in nature. So fast forward, I was in a busy dental practice. I wound up leaving and not really sure what to do with myself. I wound up getting coached and found that to be extremely powerful and life-changing. And in the course of everything, went to IPEC myself to get certified, which I love because the way that they teach is very yogic in nature in terms of energy levels and shifting energy and all of those things. And yet now here we are several years later. I am the co-host of the podcast Happy and Human. I have a book connected, Discovering Your Inner Guides, which is all about helping kids ages 8 through 80 navigate their emotions. And the best thing of all is I really get to help ambitious leaders, just like the two of you and just like our listeners. I get to help them see the opportunities that they're looking for to live the life that they want to live, a life of their dreams. I help them see how they're right in front of them and take advantage of them to live a full happy, meaningful life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I can relate to some degree, and a doctor so many times say the same thing as far as like they had it all, the house, the spouse, the baby, right, the attending, and you know what's wrong. They could, you know, they just didn't understand. And I, like you, when we had at the same time, new house, new town, new baby. I stopped working a little bit. My husband switched jobs. We didn't know anybody. I was an hour away. And my son threw up all the time for the first year. We later found out he had life-threatening food allergies, which was probably why. And you know, and he didn't sleep during the night. He slept, but not during the day. And that first year, it was really, really hard. And it wasn't until, and again, we just talked so much about making connections, and it was really like a year later where we joined a play group and things like that and started to make connections. So yeah, I can relate. So Tracy, what would you like us to know about you?
Wow, there's so much I just want to dive into already.
Go right
And
ahead.
I think that I think Seema's story really resonates probably with a lot of people, not just physicians, but people in the medical community. So, but before I do that, let me tell you a little bit about me. So, I'm a mid-career physician. I've trained as a pathologist, dermatopathologist, worked in private practice for 17 years. And, kind of struggled off and on throughout my career. I think had I known anything about coaching, especially early on in my career, it really would have helped me. And I know coaching was around, but I just, now I feel like, especially newer physicians are really positioned in a place to get so much more exposure to people talking about things that we're all experiencing versus, and I don't know how you feel about this, Seema, but my first few years out of training were really rough. And
Yeah.
I blamed it all on me. I thought, gosh, what is wrong with me? I've spent my entire career, my, life getting to this point, and I am not happy. Something is wrong here. And it was a real struggle. I eventually kind of moved on and got out of that. But I feel like a lot of people are really still there. So, for me, I always describe my career as kind of a series of roller coasters. I mean, I've done it all. Read my blog, and you can see that I've been laid off. I've been in toxic environments, just the whole shebang. And so, what first brought me to coaching actually was I was ready to leave medicine. I was just like, okay, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. But I felt guilty about it. And I thought, okay, well, I'll sign up for this coaching program and get coached. And then I can tell everybody, yeah, I've done everything. I did everything I possibly could to stay in medicine. And now I don't feel guilty about leaving. So this was the premise for me, originally working with a coach. And as you might imagine, a few weeks into it, I started to realize like, okay, well, a big part of the problem here is actually me and how I am interacting with the world and myself. And when I say that, I always like to preface that by saying, sometimes people I think misunderstand coaching and thinking that it's this toxic, positivity. Just think happy thoughts and life will be so much better. And it's so not the truth. Where I was working, it was still had its issues, but a big contributing factor to how I was experiencing my life at that time was due to me and my thoughts and sort of feelings about all of that. And so anyway, it really made a big difference for me. And at that point I thought, I would like to do this at some point down the road. And kind of put it on the back burner, continued working, doing all of that. And then, fast forward a few years, up till maybe a couple of years ago, a number of big things happened in my life, both professionally and personally. And it just, the types of things that make you stop and really take stock in your life and figure out, am I really doing what it is that I want to be doing? And among those questions, one of the things that came up was, I'm really interested in this coaching. If I don't pursue this, then when am I going to pursue this? And so that was it, like a month later, I was in the program and you know, IPEC, but there's a lot of different coaching programs out there, but IPEC really resonated with me. And, you know, so now I still work full time. I'm a physician. I work in the biopharmaceutical industry. I have a coaching business called The Happy Physician. And I write this newsletter. And it's just like, I feel like it's the best of everything for me. And I feel like for me personally, I have coaching to thank for that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and that brings a lot of things to my mind, but I'll just share a couple quickly. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Amna Shabir. And if you haven't, we'll get, okay, yeah. And cause she, you know, really, so her coaching, she works as a geriatrician and coaches early career physicians, speaking exactly to what you were saying, is the first few years are really rough. And you're thinking, hey, once I'm attending, it's going to be fine. So I think it's so important that so many of you are talking about this and saying, look, it is really hard to be an early career attending, and you lose if you add some support as a resident, and you often lose that as an attending. So sometimes it can be even more difficult when you think that whole arrival fallacy, right? So
Absolutely.
I think it's so important that you're all talking about this to let early career attendings know it's okay and normal to be struggling, and that there's help out there. And the other thing you mentioned, I don't know if you know Dr. Charity Hicks. If not, you guys can connect with her. Great. And she, I like what she talks in her coaching is about starting where you are, which is exactly what you did. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to leave medicine or you're going to leave medicine. And what she did for herself, you know, was just make things the best she can where she is. And then, you know, and then make a decision from there. So I like the way you talked about that as well. So Seema, so you can share whatever you want. One suggestion I had was in our conversation, along with you talking about yoga saving your life, if you wanted to dive into that a little more, or we also talked about like energy work, breath work, meditation. And I believe that some doctors still likely think of that stuff as woo. And that I thought perhaps hearing another doctor talk about these practices intelligently might open a window or a door to their minds to something that could benefit them tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about that. You know, before I do though, Tracy, I just wanted to say I thank you so much for sharing, and I think you touched on something really important here, which is that these modalities, whether that's coaching or therapy or more ancient ritualistic practices like meditation, breathwork, yoga, things like that, I think there's just generally more of it available, not only in mainstream what's in front of us, right? But then also more and more hospital systems are offering these sorts of things as support, not just for residents and not just for fellows, but for attendings as well. And still yet, I find there is a lot of resistance, despite it being paid for and covered, because full transparency, when I first heard of life coaching, I was 25 and fresh out of school, and I had my doctor degree, and I thought I was just so special and smart. And when I heard of life coaching, I thought, how bad do you have to be at life to need a coach? Like, I'm smart. I can figure this out. I don't need help. And it's just such a toxic way of thinking, and we don't know that it is, right? So what you said really resonated with me. And I'm so glad that there are more and more doctors who are coaches looking to kind of brighten the space up and give support. But back, Kim, to your question, you know, first of all, I want to say, and this is it might land a little heavy for people, but I want to ask if we can just stop calling it woo. Stop calling it fluff. And I'm not saying this to you personally, Kim, because it was important for you to use those words so that we can identify who might be thinking this. Hand raised, I also used to use these words to describe things like yoga and meditation and coaching. And just because it doesn't make sense to you, please don't dismiss it and say it's woo or fluff. Because there's actually a lot of science behind everything. And a lot of the science was just before we had it existent in a Western world context, but it did exist. And the beauty of it now is that we're able to explain why these modalities are so effective through quantum physics. So some of my favorite books are The Field by Lynn McTaggart, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Gosh, there's so many, but they really speak to the science and all of the evidence that is now being proven, paper after paper after paper, about why this is so effective. So I'm just going to pause there so we can have a little conversation and make it less, I don't want to just sit here on my soapbox because I can tend to do that.
Right. Go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, yeah, there's just so many things to talk about, really. Like, I think we as physicians sort of induce this state of craziness, just by the virtue of how we train. You recruit a bunch of people who are all high achievers, and you put them all in a room and you ask them to do whatever it takes to get the recommendations to, do the scut work. I mean, that's what we referred to it when I was in school. When I say that, I sound like I'm 100, but
I think they still call it scut work, but I'm not sure.
Just checking. So, but like, for me, it is constant, and I think this is true for for all physicians, really. It's like, here's the next bar, and we do work, and yay, we've achieved that. But then as soon as you get there, as soon as you finish, as soon as you get into med school, you have to get the recommendations. And then it's the next step is to get into a residency. And if you're going to do a fellowship, that too. And finally, you get to the end of these goals that we've placed in front of us, all the while completely sacrificing our own personal lives to the benefit of the education. I mean, we ask a lot of medical students and residents and fellows. And then we're just expected to kind of assimilate back into normal life. And it's very difficult. And I work with a lot of physicians that are like, actually, most of the physicians I end up working with are either straight out of med school, like, wow, I feel like I chose the wrong profession, or sort of mid-career where I was, where, it's like you said earlier, Seema, everything on paper looks great, but why am I still not happy? And, that's not an insignificant thing to happen in, the middle of your life. We're not going to live forever, and it's, not a dress rehearsal. Like, now is the time to be happy. And in my book, whatever it takes to actually do that, being true to yourself and recognizing and identifying what it is that's going to bring the most fulfillment into your life, like, that's really important.
Yeah.
And then just circling back to your comment about woo, oh my, training at a program that talks about core energy, and then, it sounds very, like you said, woo. But I wanted to use this moment just to say that, there are a lot of people that are out there coaching, and really we're all, for the most part, I would say, talking about the same types of things. We just use different terms, so you talk about the inner critic, the judge, the gremlin, if you will, it's all the same concepts. And but I think that there's so much value there. And if there's anything that your listeners today can take away from this, is that know that there are people that have been where you are and have gotten through it through a variety of different things, including coaching, yoga, breath work. All of these things are just really pretty phenomenal, and they're worth exploring.
Yeah. And I think the other misconception is like, well, I don't have time for that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And my thing is, well, you're already breathing. I think it's we do a discredit to our medical students and dental students when, I mean, I remember being in gross anatomy and, dissecting out the vagus nerve. I remember learning even before starting, all of that, and just being pre-med and knowing, right, like, this is the basic physiology of how things work, the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic nervous system. And what we miss in our education is this really truly this crucial thing of, no, do you understand it's not about just regulating your heart rate? Like, this is what really truly toning your vagal nerve can do for you, right? Why does that, just from a biology standpoint, a physiology standpoint, you can back it up with all the science you want, right? When we create this, Tracy, you were mentioning that the inner not enoughness, right? The guard thoughts that we have about I'm not enough, or you're judging the person or the place or the circumstances around us. And, when we can leverage these practices, because we understand just how effective they are, it actually doesn't take a lot of time, right? I was coaching one provider just a few weeks ago, and they were telling me, well, clinic gets so busy and there's just so much going on, and I'm in charge of all the APPs, I'm in charge of all the, all of the this, all of the that, and all the physicians, and I get frustrated with myself because I can't make a decision when somebody's asking for something and it's all happening so fast. And when we went back and we kind of talked about what it means to have overwhelm, it's like we're expecting our higher brain functions to work seamlessly when we're in a state of stress. And it's like, that's not, you don't have to go to the caves of the Himalayas to breathe a little bit more mindfully and help shift back, right? But that's just, again, one of those many misconceptions and thought errors that we have as busy healthcare providers is, I don't have time for this. This is fluff. This is woo. This doesn't work. And so I just wanted to also encourage, because Tracy, what I heard you say was taking time to cultivate awareness for when those types of thoughts come up, and then just giving yourself a second, a moment to sit there and shift, because you can do it and it does work.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring that up, Seema, in that, so many physicians I talk to say it in various terms. They feel trapped. I'm stuck. I feel trapped in medicine. I feel like I have no other options. And, it's so, I mean, it really strikes at the heart, because I felt that way. I was there for a very long time. And, I felt, wow, I've invested all of this time into my energy. I don't really know how to do anything else. Like, all of these thoughts come into play and really can give you sort of this tunnel vision. And the more, it's all about, like, your thoughts really do create your reality. And so, by me believing that I was trapped, I was never, ever going to experience anything different. And
Yeah.
that link between, this is my belief about the world or about me, really serves to reinforce and create the world around you. And once you realize that, like you said earlier, once you realize that you can choose how to really shift your mind around some of these things, it's not going to change the outer circumstances, but, it is going to change how you respond to that. And there's so much power there.
Yeah.
That, I hope, if anything, if you take anything away from this conversation, I hope that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And if I could jump in, Dr. Michael Hurst, you both know him yet? He's my, my physician coach. And, he talks about, like what you guys said, and Seema, about being skeptical, right? But he says it's okay to have a healthy degree of skepticism. And at first, when he thought about coaching or was on a coaching call, and it, he thought it was pretty good, but he's like, no, it's not for me. And he's kind of like, like, this is the answer to all my problems, right? But then, speaking to what you're both saying, that it, when you realize that your thoughts control your feelings, and all of that stuff, can you give any like specific examples of how changing your thoughts can change your life, or what you really mean for people that haven't had any coaching at all?
Yeah. I think one that I hear often, and I'm sure Kim and Tracy, you guys have heard some version of this as well from people, is, well, I get up and, it's just go, go, go right from the time you wake up, and I've got to get the kids ready, and I've got to get them out of the door for school, and then I've got to, get to work, and then I go and work is busy. And then they tell themselves the story about how they're experiencing life as the grind, right? It's a grind. It's same stuff, different day, some version of that. And in that, I feel like, we experience life as a result of how we speak to ourselves, right? We lead others as a result of how we lead ourselves. And so when we're speaking to ourselves with this like, oh, same crap, different day, you miss all the beauty that exists in those moments, right? The amount of gratitude to be able to wake up, to be able to hear the alarm clock go off. That's not something everybody on the planet is able to do. The fact that you're charged with these children to support and nurture and love, and yeah, kids are challenging. Being a parent is challenging. Balancing that with your own self-care and integrating that into work and with what that looks like for you if you have a partner or a spouse or the rest of your family, it's not easy. But when we look at it with, I get to do this, right? This was something that I chose to do, and now what I get to do is nurture somebody else to go out and be the best version of themselves, whether that's as a parent or as a doctor or as a colleague. We get to support one another. And when we start seeing it that way, we no longer start to feel like everything is such a stress, everything is such a grind. When my kid is upset, I have a middle schooler, there's a lot of emotions. It's very easy. I would be lying if I said I never slipped into, what I'll call a lower energy of judgment, right? Of like, oh, why can't they just figure it out? But when I see it for what it really is, there's an unmet need for connection. And it's my opportunity to model for him what it means to be compassionate and empathetic. Well, now it's not really a source of stress for me. It's an opportunity for me to connect with him. And it's an opportunity for me to show myself what I'm made of. It's hard to feel stressed out about that.
If I could add one thing, if you guys know Dr. Mary Long as well, if not, well, I'll connect you guys. And she is also a coach, and she mainly helps physicians with like charting issues, and to get home on time.
Oh, yeah.
And she also talks about gratitude. That's a huge part of what she does, exactly what you're saying, Seema, and also little celebrations throughout the day, like, yay, I saw 2 patients, yay, it's not raining, like anything. And she says how much of a difference that makes. So, Tracy, what is this bringing up for you?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because, I often think about the sort of finding balance between, okay, we're all human, we all have struggles, and, wishing those struggles to go away is really not the solution. But, where do you spend your time and your focus? If I'm spending all of my time focused on, all of these, this horrible thing that's happening, versus trying to find, the joy in the clouds, in the afternoon or whatever, it's really, where do you want to spend your focus and your energy? And I think I wrote about this recently. It's sort of the equivalent is, oh, wow, I found a treasure chest. And you can talk about the gold in the treasure chest, or you can talk about the rusty lock on the outside. Where do you really want to spend your time and your energy? And as a result, where is your mind going to be during the day? So, to me, I think that's kind of key to understanding sort of this, mindfulness, and the underlying premises of gratitude practices. It's, if we look for it, we can find great, beautiful things in life, at work, in a crazy busy clinic, with screaming toddlers at home. But if we look for the horribleness, we can also find that. And so how do you want to spend your life? And I think it's important, again, to just stress that, it doesn't negate these negative things that may be happening.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that we need to give them the same amount of our energy, of our attention and focus, as we would to some of the more beautiful things in life. You know, that's, in my opinion, at least, really the secret to a happier life.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's great. And actually, I remember Michael Hurst talking once about, for a while, he was thinking everything is a disaster. You know, oh, this is a disaster, that's a disaster. But it's like, is it really a disaster? And, you know, just changing your mindset can change your day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's,
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in with another sort of idea about, you know, the circumstances are always going to be what they are. And, you know, one of my favorite stories is, you know, two people on an airplane that, you know, is undergoing a lot of turbulence. And the one person has a death grip, you know, on the arms, and they're, you know, freaking out, afraid the plane's going to fall out of the air. And the guy next to him is like, woo, this is super fun. And it, you know, it just goes to show you that, okay, the circumstances are the same for both of them, yet these two people experience that situation in entirely different ways. And, you know, just imagine if you could experience work as the guy on the left versus the guy on the right, or life that way, you know, how different your life would be.
Yeah. And we can, right? It's just a matter of like, it's literally like toning that muscle, right? And that's what, you know, Tracy and I get to do with, like, when we're coaching one-on-one clients or doing, I'm not sure, Tracy, what you do outside of just the one-on-one coaching, or if that's what you like to spend time doing. But anytime, it sounds like, whether you're writing a newsletter or doing all the wonderful things that you do, it, you know, we get to be the supportive scaffolding, if you will, to help people shift and do that. And like trainers, right? We just work that muscle out, and you get
Right.
bigger and stronger.
It's like
to where you
having a
shift.
personal trainer for your brain.
Yeah.
Coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel like we could talk all day, so we're gonna have a reunion episode because this is fantastic. Do you have any top tips for your colleagues, from seasoned physicians to medical students, or even those considering med school?
Top tips. You know, my top tip would just be, there are a lot of resources available, and, you know, chances are what you're struggling with, you are not alone. And that is, I think, super important. And whether you pursue, you know, working with a coach, or, you know, trying a number of different sort of ancient practices, you know, there's a lot of benefit to be had out there, and there's real science to support it.
Yeah. I would say build the life that you want from day one. Even if you're, you know, 30 years into practice, it's not too late to start building the life that you really want. And it won't necessarily happen overnight, but it will happen way faster than if you sit there complaining about how you don't have the life that you want, right? You are in charge of that. You have the power to create that. And sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and creating awareness for what it is that you actually want. And it may not, and it's also not an either or situation. It's a yes and situation, right? Tracy didn't leave medicine. She, you know, figured out a way to have her cake and eat it too. And that's true for all of us. We have that power, we have that capacity. And so, you know, you deserve the best version of yourself so that you can give that best version to everybody else. Spend time thinking about what that looks like and feels like, and go forth and build it, even if it's just a little bit at a time.
Thanks. I love that. And Dr. David Fezel, it might have been when we were recording a podcast with Todd Otten and Kevin MD, and he was saying, speaking to your point, like, that you can change one thing at a time, like take one step. You know, you're not going to have your ideal life tomorrow, but think of just one thing you can work towards or start to do differently towards building that. So thank you for bringing that up. How can our listeners get in touch with you, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and or you can visit my website, which is thehappyphysician.com. And definitely please reach out, and I can tell you all about more happiness related studies, which is another passion of mine.
Awesome. And then Seema, go ahead and share how our listeners can get in touch with you as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well. We'll put all of this in the show notes, I presume. And then my website, drseemadesai.com, and that's, you can get in touch with me. My email is there, as well as I have a free how to create a gratitude practice that works for you that's available, as well as details on my breathwork course. And I'll be holding a retreat in the fall for ambitious women leaders who want to come up for air and actually create some space for some soul work and meaningful connection. So all of that information, as it's available, will be on my website.
Okay, well, thank you again for being my guest today, Tracy and Seema. This was a fabulous discussion, as I knew it would be.
Thank you so much.
Definitely.
And
Yeah, thanks, Kim. This was great.
Oh, sure. So in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.